Thanks for joining me for this video on self-actualization and self-transcendence. These upper or higher stages of development can be difficult to understand, a bit confusing. My aim in this video is to offer some clarity so that your path won't be any more difficult or confusing than it needs to be. And we'll get to the topic in just a moment. First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Michael Dewan-Herrick. I'm the creator of the online store called Bazaar, for which you can find a description and a link below. Please come and visit the store and check it out. Now let's get right to our topic. While self-actualization and self-transcendence can be seen as stages that we can attain in our development, there are also our needs. According to the American psychologist Abraham Maslow, who came up with a needs hierarchy, there are the upper reaches of our unfolding needs. You may be aware of Maslow, and I'll go over that very briefly. Our first needs are physiological. We need food, we need water, we need rest. We just need to be able to maintain our organism. Beyond that, we have safety needs. So in addition to that, we need to not be injured or killed. If we can accomplish that and we survive, then we have belongingness needs, which means we want to be a member of our human group and have relationships and feel a sense of a place socially. As that need begins to get met, another need unfolds, which is for self-esteem or esteem from others. We want to feel good about ourselves, and we want others to appreciate us and esteem us. If this has been sufficiently met as a need, then we move on to self-actualization, which is the need to become our own person and to develop our own gifts and talents and potentials, to really find out who we are and make the most of it and pursue our own goals and our own dreams. This used to be considered the top of Maslow's need hierarchy. However, toward the latter part of his life, he identified an additional need beyond self-actualization. Unfortunately, he died of a heart attack in 1970 and had begun to write about this, but it hadn't been widely published. Since it's been taken up and developed further by other people, but Maslow identified it early on, and he identified it as self-transcendence. And this is the need to go beyond ourselves, to not simply become everything that we can be, but go beyond that. I want to read a quote from Maslow that I thought really captures the idea and its relationship to self-actualization. According to Maslow, he said, quote, "Self-actualization is indeed a lofty and worthy goal of development. It should not be cast aside in favor of the shiny new need. But self-transcendence is truly the next level of development. It is other-focused instead of self-focused and concerns higher goals than those which are self-serving." So there he's identifying self-transcendence, but I think he makes it a very important point, which I will be making further in the video, which is that self-actualization is not to be left prematurely or really at all. But it's not the end of the road. There's something greater, which is self-transcendence. Although I'm focusing on self-actualization and self-transcendence in this video, I want to be clear that the earlier needs are still there. We still need all of those earlier things. How are we going to actualize ourselves if we're killed? How are we going to do anything if we don't have some meaningful connection to other people? So just as we need food and water and rest at the bottom of the hierarchy, I think we need each one all the way up. And just because we're at self-transcendence doesn't mean we don't still have needs for self-actualization. Maybe you can look at it that way. Before saying more about self-actualization, I want to say this, which is something I say in my other videos, but I think it's a really important starting point. We have to first discover what it is that we love, what we care about, what we have a passionate interest in. That's a really important foundation. If we haul off to try to develop our potentials and realize ourselves, but it's all based on what we think we're supposed to do or what we've been told we should do, and we haven't discovered our own deep, I'm doing this because I think it's something we feel in our heart, in our gut, when we're connected to something that matters to us. So that's the starting point. That will suggest what your goals are or could be. I think another important starting point is to identify our values. And that's also what we care about in terms of how we want to be, who we want to be. I think self-actualization means pursuing our goals and living our values, the ones that we've chosen and matter to us. Given that starting point, that suggests that one of the first things we need is to pursue self-knowledge. We need to know ourselves, get to know ourselves, our values, our goals, what we care about, but also our strengths. What are we good at? What are our weaknesses? What do we need to work on? What are our limits? And then for self-actualization, will require discipline. It requires taking up habits and practices to cultivate our knowledge, our skills, our qualities that will serve our goals and serve our values. And obviously this requires discipline. It's a path of discipline. And I'm not going to elaborate on it in this video, but if you've seen any of my other videos, you know I often refer to body-mind relationships and environment. These 4 areas that are related to the integral notion of the 4 quadrants. And I think self-actualization means that we're knowing ourselves in these 4 ways, we're identifying our strengths and our weaknesses and our areas of growth, and we're engaging in disciplines and habits that cultivate all 4 of those dimensions of our lives and ourselves. That requires patience, it requires a tolerance of frustration, tolerance for failure, and again, this is why I believe it's important that we choose something that we really care about. I think that can sustain us, that can give us motivation. No one can tell you when you've reached sufficient self-actualization for this to happen, but at some point, as you go along that path, you will begin to long for something more. You'll begin to have glimpses of something more, and that's self-transcendence. We often can get peaks at this experience, brief moments, and if you've ever had one, you know that it's amazing, it's liberating, it's powerful, it's profound, it's really life-changing. And I just want to say, yeah, it is. And let's not be tempted to abandon self-actualization at that point and simply pursue self-transcendence. We need to keep on with our disciplines, keep on with our practices, and cultivating ourselves. Something that's talked about quite a lot in terms of self-transcendence and given a lot of emphasis is what's called flow states. And these are states of mind and states of body, really, because it encompasses our entire being. We're in a flow. We've practiced and we've mastered things to the point where we can do them effortlessly without thinking. Time slips away, disappears. A very sense of self vanishes. We're utterly immersed and we're performing at top level. We're doing things we couldn't imagine earlier. We're in a flow and things are just happening. We're instantly doing what we need to do, recognizing what needs to be recognized, putting it all together in a kind of a miraculously immediate way, and it's just working. It's amazing. I'm sure this happens in all different fields. For artists, for musicians, for writers, because those are things that I've spent a lot of time doing. I can sense and have had those experiences of flow state, but I'm sure that it happens for software engineers and for anybody doing anything. When you've gotten really good at it and you really love it and you're in your groove and it's just, you're cooking, right? You're crushing it, as they say. And you're not even there. As far as you're concerned, it's just you're one with the activity itself. There's no you and the thing you're doing. Like for a musician, there's not, here's me, here's my instrument, and here's music. It's just music. It's all goes together and you're executing it beautifully. This is it's a high, really. It's a natural high, and it's very understandable that a lot is made out of this and that people focus on this. Indeed, I believe it is a sign and an experience of self-transcendence. However, I think it's a mistake if we want to take that as a source of self-esteem. If we want to get proud about it, we want to own it, we want to show the world and get praise for it and all of that. Perhaps it's not hard to see. That's hardly self-transcendence, right? If you're proud, if you want to be recognized, great, nothing against that. But I just want to separate that from self-transcendence. This is taking the experience of the flow state and having it come back into some earlier needs, fulfilling the need for esteem, perhaps. And nothing wrong with that. All I'm saying is recognize it for what it is. And know that self-transcendence is getting beyond the self. No longer preoccupied with oneself and one's esteem. At that point, we're not doing things to improve ourselves. We're not doing things to get recognition or boost our esteem. We're doing things because we love to do them, and we care about what we're doing, and we care about fulfilling the purpose of why we're doing it. And it's not about us anymore. It's about the offering, the gift that we're giving as the fruit of our self-actualization is a fruit that we're giving away joyfully. And at this point, if we get criticism or negative judgments about what we're doing, we don't experience it as a blow to our ego or our self-esteem. We don't collapse in shame. We either get curious and look for the value in what's being said. Maybe somebody has a point. Maybe there's something I could do better. Not so I can feel better about myself, but so that I can offer something that's as excellent as possible. And this is one of the beautiful aspects of self-transcendence is no longer needing to be defensive around criticism. And if what is being said is not of great value, it doesn't help us learn or improve anything, then we can step around it. We don't have to, we're not trying to prove ourselves. We don't have to persuade the person that we're good. We just keep going. And this, I think, makes us a very powerful force. However, it's not a self-serving power. It's other-serving. And when the ego hears this, the ego might say something. You might feel something like, wait a minute, I worked my ass off to get this good at what I'm doing, and now you're telling me I got to give it all away? Really? My answer to that is yes and no. If you need more self-esteem, if you want to feed that part of yourself, that part of your ego, go for it. I think it will diminish, though, the self-transcendent part of it. And what is perceived as a loss from the ego, by the ego, is really the gain of something that the ego can't even imagine. Something bigger, something more joyful, more powerful. I truly believe that. This is why I don't really emphasize all of the superpowers of the flow state. Yes, they're miraculous, they're amazing, you feel high on it, but it's so easy for the ego to co-opt that and let it meet earlier needs that it can cause us to miss the point. So perhaps I'm making that point sufficiently enough by now. Perhaps it's important to also point out that while self-transcendence may rob the ego of that gratification, it also, in a way, immunizes us to unproductive self-critical thoughts, self-hatred, and doubts, self-doubt. We can finally get out of our own way in pursuit of what we love and not be held back by those things. These thoughts, these feelings probably will always arise, but the more you're moving towards self-transcendence, the less power they have, the less weight they have. They're like annoying visitors that don't have to stay very long. If you like this video, please give it a like and hit the notification bell to hear about further videos. Also, please subscribe to my channel. And if you know anybody who may like to hear what I'm saying, please share it. I'd appreciate that. Thanks a lot. There are a lot of different avenues or practices or experiences that can lead us to self-transcendence. Meditation, right? Pursuing a spiritual path that includes meditation. For some, it's attained through taking psychedelic drugs. For others, as mentioned, the flow state, which can be the product of really mastering our skills and our knowledge in certain areas. There's another way that we can experience self-transcendence, which is when we surrender to our group and we are serving our group. And this is, I want to focus on that one. There's, many different ways to get to self-transcendence, but I want to talk about when we get there by surrendering to our group, and the other one, which usually involves meditation, but there are other ways to get there, which are becoming aware of the construct and the illusion of self, the conceptual self, all of our thoughts and ideas about ourselves. When we actually can see that, and we're not identified with it anymore, and instead we're identified with the witness of that, the construct of ourselves. The construct of ourselves is not ourselves. Our transcendent self is the witness of that. So let me go back and talk a little bit more about what can happen in service to the group. So it's not self-serving. As Maslow said, it's other-serving. And whatever our group is, we care more about it in a sense, than we do ourselves, and that's self-transcendence. But where is our group? Where's the moral center of gravity for our group? if and this is again why self-actualization, we need to keep working on that. Self-actualization means that we're becoming our own person. We're identifying our own values, our own priorities, our own way of understanding the world. And if we're surrendering all that to the group to figure out for us, and then we're just serving the group, I think, and I may have found a downside to self-transcendence, or a potential downside. What are we serving? Who are we serving? A really easy example to illustrate this is to consider the good Nazi, who is devoted to the fatherland, right? Self-transcending, disciplined, very disciplined, developing all their talents, putting them to use for the Reich. That's an easy example. There are others. The 20th century is loaded with them. The good Maoist, who really got on board with the Chinese Cultural Revolution, suicide bombers. Maybe you can think of some other examples. People who have subordinated their self to service of the group, and in that sense experience self-transcendence. But there's a problem. The moral center of gravity is at the conventional stage. There's not enough time in this video to elaborate very much, but I do want to mention Lawrence Kohlberg's stages of moral development, sometimes considered the cognitive stages of moral development. It's the way we think about what's good. Kohlberg identified 3 stages. Each one has 2 levels: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. And to boil this down, pre-conventional is what's good for me. What's good is what I want. We develop beyond that, and it becomes what's good is what's good for my group. What's good is what abides by the rules and the laws and the standards of my group. If I follow that, that's good, because I'm participating in the group in a way that's workable, and everybody should follow the rules so that we can live happily together. That is a higher development than than pre-conventional. There's no conventions. Pre-conventional is just my way. The higher stage of moral development, Kohlberg called it post-conventional, which is when the rules and the laws of the group are not the highest priority. What's the higher priority are universal moral principles, and the rules of the group have to be evaluated in terms of those higher universal understandings. I think it's easy to assume, and I think I for a long time felt this way too, that at the stage of self-transcendence, somehow every other line of development gets a bump. Every other line comes up. If you're self-transcending, you're at some pinnacle. What I'm saying is it's possible to have the experience of self-transcendence and be at a conventional stage of moral development. And it turns out, I think, that because self-transcendence is such a high, it's such a profoundly meaningful experience, it becomes a resource for those with nefarious intentions, those with world-dominating ambitions, that if you can harness that in great numbers of people to serve your purpose. And in exchange, they get the high of a self-transcendent feeling, an other-serving virtue. It's remarkable what can happen. If the moral center of gravity is at post-conventional, or it's at this stage of universal moral principles, then amazing things can happen. If it's not, then horrendous things can happen, and have happened, and potentially will continue to happen. A couple things I didn't mention earlier, but I can mention now in terms of what has happened. Once upon a time we had the Inquisition, right? Once upon a time the Western expansion went by the idea of manifest destiny. We, us, we are destined to conquer the world. Us. And the others that we have to conquer, they're not included. Conventional, not post-conventional universal principle. A universal principle includes everybody. As we begin to experience self-transcendence, I believe we need to ask ourselves, what higher purpose am I serving? Is it universal, or is it only serving a particular group? If I'm being doped up by leaders and teachers or anybody with self-transcendence, what are their purposes? What is their vision? Am I on board with it? We have to think this through for ourselves. We have to come to our own understanding and be willing to pursue that. Instead of leaping from belongingness needs and esteem needs right over self-actualization to self-transcendence, we need to come back and become our own person. I'm not saying that there's no place for conventional morality or there's no place for serving our group. What I'm saying that at the stage of self-transcendence that has some self-actualization under its belt, we're able to scrutinize those conventions and those aims of our group critically and not just accept them and not just join the herd. We can actually think about it. And it's always more complicated, right? Here's a complication that occurred to me in developing this video. So say you're a rebel, and I'm not saying everybody needs to be a rebel. You don't have to be a rebel to be self-transcendent, but you have to have the capacity to rebel. What can also happen is that there may be a subgroup of rebels that you want to join because you're critical of the mainstream group, right? And so you're fighting against the man, the system, whatever it is. And you're transcending yourself by opposing the group. But in fact, you've joined another group. You've joined a different herd. There may be an ideology, and it may not be based on universal moral principles. It may be based on there's bad people who need to be eliminated and there's good people who need to be rescued, and I'm on the side of the good. This is the same formula throughout history for mass genocide and just human tragedy beyond belief. Millions of people slaughtered. So just because you're a rebel doesn't mean you've avoided the trap that I've identified earlier. You have to really, I think all of us have to really think this through. I thought I'd share the trigger for some of these thoughts for me was in watching a video by Jonathan Haidt, who was talking about self-transcendence, and he was identifying how it comes about through service to the group. And one of the examples he gave was the profound experiences that World War II veterans express about being in battle and serving their country and having each other's backs, and that sense of transcending themselves was a peak experience in their lives, and they never forgot it. It was one of the most important experiences in their lives. I thought, well, yes, of course, I've heard this, I understand that. And then I thought, okay, these soldiers were fighting against other soldiers. They were fighting against German soldiers, sometimes Japanese soldiers, and who also were having the same transcendent, self-transcendent experience. And it made me think we have to be especially curious when our self-transcendence is coming from the surrender to our group. In summary, I want to say that this video, what I've said, has been about taking a step back and getting the bigger view of self-development and not focusing on the nuts and bolts and the details. That self-actualization and self-transcendence are built upon having met our earlier needs, our physiological needs, our safety needs, our belongingness needs, and our esteem needs. And then we can set about to become our own person, develop our own talents and skills and abilities to the fullest, and then we can begin to transcend ourselves by serving something greater than ourselves. That may be our group. It may be a universal principle that guides us. Part of the experience of self-transcendence can be the flow state, which is amazing, which is miraculous. However, it's not an ornament for our ego. It is the richness that we have to offer to what we're serving beyond ourselves. If our self-transcendence is in service to our group, then we can ask ourselves a couple questions. One is, what's the moral center of gravity for the group we're serving? We can also recognize that if our self-transcendence has been attained by service to the group from a conventional stage of moral development, we may be making ourselves a resource for those who are not oriented to universal moral principles. And in a word, you could say evil. I'm sorry to put it that way, but I think that it needs to be said. That's what's at stake. As far as I can see, I'll tell you, as far as I can see, there may be more. If there is, may you find it. But to me, to be on a path of self-actualization and self-transcendence, and to be at a post-conventional stage of moral development in those pursuits, is as high as we can go. It's as high as I can see. And for most of it, I think it's what we can aspire to. It's a bit funny. Maybe you'll agree with me. It's a bit funny that we start as a project of self-improvement, where we really want to like ourselves. We want to value ourselves. We want to be valued by others. We want to attain things and realize our dreams and create the life we want, be the person we want to be. Such noble and wonderful aspirations. And then it all comes down to this notion of self-transcendence, where we give it away. It's maybe the biggest cosmic bait and switch scam there is. And from the ego's point of view, it's a ripoff, right? But from the other side of that, there's a vast joy, there's a vast sense of meaning and purpose and satisfaction that cannot be gotten any other way. And I invite you to lean in that direction. I'm not saying that in order to achieve self-actualization and self-transcendence that you have to single-handedly save the world. You may have more ordinary aspirations in your day-to-day life or in your career, but they can be pursued with the same gusto and the same sense of depth of meaning and the same sense of ultimate purpose. It doesn't matter. You can be an artist, you can be a scientist, you could be a rubbish collector, street sweeper, a nurse, a teacher, you could be a therapist. There's all kinds of mundane things that we can do to realize these highest stages of our development. So I'm saying, discover what you love, pursue it fully, be disciplined, develop your skills and your talents as far as you can take them, and then give them away to what you love, to what's important, to what's the highest thing beyond yourself that you can give it to. Okay, that's it for now. As usual, I will do a brief synopsis of this video and create a link for it so that you can have that to refer to it if you'd like to review my main points. But thank you for coming. Thank you for sticking with me. This has been a particularly long video, and I hope that I've held your attention. If you have stayed, thank you so much. Come back. I'd like to see you again. Bye for now.